So today I wanted to talk about something Paul Finebaum recently said regarding playoff caliber teams, and that is that the Oklahoma Sooners were a team that he viewed as having no faults heading into the 21 season, which makes their hype about a playoff run and a national championship push this season very legitimate in his eyes. And I wanted to talk about that and also the other playoff caliber teams, or the teams with playoff aspirations this season. And I can't wait to break this all down. But before we do, as always, y'all know the drill. I want to hear from y'all. Hop down to the comments, give me a Y for yes or an N for no. Do you believe that the Oklahoma Sooners will be one of the 4 teams featured in the college football playoffs? And then let me know who your 4 teams are. I'm really interested to see what y'all have to say here. If you're new to the channel, be sure to subscribe, hit that bell notification, that way you don't miss any of my uploads, because I do constant college football content and you don't want to miss it. And if you enjoy that content, be sure to like and comment down below. Those interactions are massive for content creators such as myself. But with all that being said and out the way, let's talk Oklahoma, and let's talk about Paul Finebaum's statements, because he was talking about how he views Oklahoma as the team with the least or no faults in the nation is actually what he said, that Oklahoma is a team with no faults. So where do I agree and where do I disagree? Well, I disagree in the sentiment that there's a team with no faults. I think right now it's the spring. Every team in the nation has questions, but I've been very forthright about this. Oklahoma fans watching, you'll know recently we did a video talking about my 2 biggest questions for the Sooners moving into 2021, one on offense, one on defense. Offense being offensive line and defense being defensive back. However, in that video, I did and was very honest in saying I think there are multiple answers to each of these questions, and I think the answers are already there. For offensive line, you have a ton of experience, a lot of talent, and experience from other places. You mix that experience from other places, a unit with decently high upside, even though you have to replace some pieces with Bill Bedenbaugh, you have to feel good about your chances, and then you take that up a step when you mix Bill Bedenbaugh in with Lincoln Riley, with Spencer Rattler, with Eric Gray, with all of those wide receiver weapons, and you have to feel good about the scheme that Lincoln Riley and company can come up with to put your team in the best place possible to succeed, even if your offensive line is operating on a worst case scenario, and there's no reason to expect that to be the case. So, at the very least, you're expecting to have a good offensive line. So we have that. The defensive backfield we talked about. Very talented. I think that the answers are in the room. It's just the inexperience to come with it. And I know that some of these guys have some starts, have some very good playing time, but DB is not a position you want to play in the Big 12, especially with how the league is predicated on the pass, and it is a very pass-happy league. Because of that, any guy that doesn't have tangible starting experience is a little bit of a disadvantage, but you have phenomenal talent in the room. We've talked about this both in freshmen, both in returning guys, getting guys like Key Lawrence out the transfer portal, and even then, if that all doesn't come together as well as you would like it to, your pass rush is such that they will be able to help that back unit grow, because they are ferocious. I mean, that pass rush is really special. The linebacking unit, very special. And so we look at Oklahoma and we acknowledge that even though I think that there are teams, I don't think that there are any teams in college football with no faults. I do believe that if I look at college football and the playoff caliber teams, and right now I'm looking at about 6 teams, maybe 7, that are playoff caliber. I have questions about Iowa State, and that's the team I put at 7, because in order for Iowa State to get to the playoffs, I have to ask myself if they can beat Oklahoma twice, because that's probably what it would have to take, and that's where it becomes very difficult to me. I don't know that they could beat Oklahoma twice. I think that they're an incredibly well-coached team. I think that they have a lot of talent. It's just, can you beat Oklahoma twice? That's very, very hard for me to say. So if we focus on the 6 other teams that I think have the most legitimate shot at the playoffs, that would be Oklahoma, Alabama, Georgia, Clemson, Ohio State, and possibly A&M. I put A&M as a long shot for all due respect for how great they were last season, but if I'm starting on questions, right, about each of these teams, I acknowledge that OU probably contains the least questions. They return a quarterback that looks to be a favorite, a way too early favorite, albeit for the Heisman Trophy. They return a coaching staff that has complete continuity, a very talented team, very talented defensively. They are booming defensively up the boards as far as progressing, and the defense is getting better and better each year under Grinch. This is a team we have to watch out for. So I do agree with Finebaum in the aspect of that this is the team with the least amount of questions. If I look at Alabama, I think Alabama is a team where, like Oklahoma, I believe there are answers to the questions. It's just that unlike Oklahoma, Alabama has to replace a brand new quarterback with a brand new offensive line. I think that right there creates a little bit more chaos. I think that the talent is absolutely there. I've been on record. Y'all know how I feel about Bryce Young. I think he's going to take the nation by storm this year. But the thing is he doesn't have the tangible experience in the SEC. Spencer Rattler returns with that experience. So I do have a little bit of questions for Alabama, though I do believe the answers are there. Much like OU, I look at the coaching, phenomenal. I look at the talent, phenomenal. Everything should come together. I think that the biggest area that separates my questions between OU and Alabama is the weapons, in the sense that Alabama has lost 4 wide receivers to the first round of the NFL draft in 2 years. Never been done before. And even though I think that when you look at John Mechie, only a hair away from 1,000 yards last season, in between Devontae Smith's incredibly historic season and Jalen Waddle's hot start to the season, you have to feel good about where the Alabama Crimson Tide receiving corps currently sit. Getting in Jamison Williams, the Ohio State transfer, the speedster is going to be great. And there are a lot of talented freshmen coming in. However, they don't have the adequate experience to the same degree that Oklahoma has. Same can be said with the running back room. The running back room is incredibly talented at Alabama, but they might not have the experience that Oklahoma has. So Alabama is a team where the questions I have for them, I do believe that they will be answered. And so in that regard, it is much the same as Oklahoma. I just don't have as many questions about Oklahoma because they simply return more pieces, which I think is completely logical. If I look at Georgia, I don't have too many questions at Georgia outside of DB. My same question for Georgia is the same question I had for Ohio State going into that national championship game. If y'all haven't seen that video, please go watch it. I talked about it before the national championship game, even after Ohio State walloped Clemson, that I thought that the biggest catalyst in that game would be Ohio State's inability to stop the pass, because I was not impressed by the DB position at the Ohio State Buckeyes last season as they were playing in the playoffs. I just felt like there's no way you're going to be able to contain the Alabama offense. Though I think that this Georgia DB room has a higher ceiling than the Ohio State one did last year, it still has a lot called into question. There's not a lot of returning experience, none for the Dogs, but a ton of talent. You look at Tyke Smith, the West Virginia transfer. You look at Brandon Turnage, the Alabama transfer, and then you add in Keely Ringo, one of the most highly regarded freshman corners of the last few years. Super talented guy. There's a lot to look forward to at the Georgia Bulldogs. It just has to come together. And then if we're looking at the offensive side of Georgia, it looks to be the first time in the Kirby Smart era that he has a dynamic quarterback that can really go out there and sling the ball with the best of them. And if we're being honest, JT Daniels does have that ability, right? He has all the arm talent you could want, and I believe he truly is the first Kirby Smart starter that has that dynamic arm ability to be able to beat a team completely offensively. The question is can Georgia do that? We know that JT Daniels has the talent, but Georgia's always been a defensive-minded team. Can that switch really come to fruition? They get a blow when Pickens goes down early in the season. That will be hard to overcome, but this is still a very, very talented room. This is still a room where you have guys such as Burton, who had a really nice freshman year. I think there are names along the Georgia receiving corps that will make themselves known this year and will become household names by the end of the year. But the question for Georgia still remains, can you defend the pass? And is your offense ready to take that next level? We know the quarterback is, and I don't doubt the ability of Georgia, right? That's not my question. I think this Georgia team is looking to be as good as they've been in recent memory, as long as the defensive back position can come together. That's the biggest question, because it's one thing to be able to pass with people. You have got to be able to at least slow down the pass, right? Ask OU the past few times they've been to the playoffs. They've had historic offenses. They couldn't stop the pass. That's why OU's bringing along that defense, because even though they realize you don't have to have the number one defense in the nation, you can't be having the ball be thrown down your throat all game long and expect to have the results you want, because it just takes away any sort of advantage you have. That's why OU's so deadly this year. Looking past Georgia, if I look at Clemson, I think the questions I have there are along the front. they really got bullied by Ohio State last year. And the interesting thing about Clemson that OU doesn't have to go through is if you look at Clemson's early matchups, OU's early schedule and the schedule in general, very friendly. Clemson could have a game with playoff implications the first week in Georgia. Not saying whoever loses that game is automatically nixed from the playoffs. I'm saying whoever loses that game does not have the breathing room to lose another game the rest of the season if they want to comfortably make the college football playoffs. They don't have that luxury. So week 1 for Clemson and Georgia, that's a big deal, especially when you look at Georgia, when you look at the SEC and as a whole, you have to go through Bama if you make it to the SEC championship, or whoever makes it out the opposite side. You have to make it through Florida, which we believe Georgia will be able to handle, but it still has to happen. You get the point. Georgia doesn't have an easy road. They can't afford to lose that game against Clemson. So because of that, the way the schedule matches up, there are more questions for both Georgia and Clemson, both in position battles and in scheduling in and of itself, than you have for Oklahoma. The last two teams I want to talk about being A&M and Ohio State. Now, I'll start with A&M. My question for A&M is not really the quarterback position. I know that that's the easy one to point to because they lose Kellen Mond. I think that the quarterback position at A&M will be fine. I think that they have some very talented options. My biggest question for A&M is that offensive line. The other day when we were talking about Oklahoma, and when I was talking about the two questions I had for this unit, and I broke down the offensive line and how the offensive line last year for Oklahoma compared to playoff offensive lines of years past, we got to the A&M offensive line, and even though they didn't make the playoffs, they only allowed 7 sacks last year, which is absolutely bonkers that was the number that they came up with. Because of that, when you lose and you have to replace all but one starter along the offensive line and mix that with a new quarterback and try and get production at the wide receiver position that you were lacking last year, even when you had a seasoned vet quarterback, a seasoned offensive line, that's a lot to overcome to me. A&M is very talented, but that's why I haven't been maybe as high on A&M just yet. I do think that they have the talent for when we get to fall for me to look at them and say, okay, well, some of these questions are answered. It just has to come to fruition. Ohio State loses a ton of talent. However, they have the wide receiver room that really right now is the only wide receiver room where you can look at and say they compete with Oklahoma and vice versa. However you want to rank those wide receiver rooms, have at it. That debate is a legitimate one, and it's a great debate to have. I don't think there's a wrong answer. I think it depends on how you look at it, so have at that debate. The interesting thing with Ohio State is even though they have such a phenomenally talented wide receiving room, they need to figure out a few different positions, and more so than usual, in my opinion. They have to figure out quarterback. That might be the position I'm least worried about there, and running back, because I think they returned very good running backs, and I love their freshman running back they just got. I think that kid's going to be a beast. Travion Henderson, I think he's a name we all need to watch out for. My main concerns with Ohio State are along the defense, is linebacker and cornerback. They're trying to get guys out of the transfer portal to address those needs right now, but those needs have got to be addressed because that could be a glaring hole for Ohio State and an otherwise talented unit. And the question needs to be asked, do they have the talent to be able to fix those problems heading into 2021? Yes, it's Ohio State. They absolutely do. It just has to be done. When you look at it like that, I absolutely can understand where Paul Finebaum is coming from when he looks at playoff caliber teams. Because of all the teams I have the least questions about, or the team that I think when I ask the questions presents the most answers, is the Oklahoma Sooners. Next would be my Alabama Crimson Tide, followed by Georgia, Clemson. You get the drill. But it's because of that right there, I have a hard time disagreeing with Paul Finebaum. I'm very, very interested to hear not only if you believe that the Oklahoma Sooners will be able to get to the college football playoff, but who your 4 playoff teams are that you think will make it to the playoff this next year. Can't wait to hear from y'all. Hop down to the comments, let me know. That's it. See ya.